A surefire way to get conservative grandparents on Facebook sharing your links around is to write the classic Che Guevara smear piece. It's practically its own genre at this point. Endless articles that just say the exact same thing and recycle the exact same supposed quotes. Zero thought, zero effort, zero fact checking, but nonetheless guaranteed to get all the charts hooting and hollering at how dumb the college libs are for wearing Che shirts. I'm honestly surprised that these writers are against socialism because they seem pretty damn good at sharing. They just plagiarize each other left and right. Anyway, the latest one of these articles is from the National Post, which is apparently a paper from the cesspool country known as Canada. Let's take a look at it and see how the claims they make actually hold up to the evidence, beyond the flowery, lib-owning language. I've already made 2 videos debunking this exact same trash on my main channel, so this should be fun. This article is also available in video form apparently, but honestly, who wants to hear some melting-faced chud reading this garbage out loud? The first actual attempt to cite something in the article is this supposed quote from Che. "Well, buckle up, hipsters. There's no other way to put this. Che Guevara really liked killing people, to the point where his diary contained exhortations to his love of smelling the blood of his enemy." The line that Che Guevara wrote about smelling the blood of his enemy was written long before he'd ever come close to smelling the quote-unquote blood of an enemy, or even been involved in anything resembling combat. He was still living in Argentina with his parents at the time. He wrote that in a literary context. That is, he wasn't literally writing about his own thoughts, obviously, since he'd never experienced the thing that he was writing about before. Rather, he was trying to be all creative and writing in the first person about some hypothetical revolutionary that certainly didn't exist, at least at the time. You know, similar to conservative kids posting badass photos of themselves posing with their dad's guns to Facebook, except really a whole lot less cringy. Now, I of course had to find this quote myself because they don't cite one. On the rare occasion that they do actually cite a source, they'll cite a secondary source, and then when you go and check it, it turns out that that source itself actually made the quote up in the first place. We're going to see that here. Next up, during the revolution, Che is known to have personally performed summary executions of accused collaborators, including peasants thought to have supplied government troops. This is simply false. The only person who Che ever personally executed was Eutimio Herrera, who was not merely a peasant thought to have supplied government troops. Rather, he was an ally of the guerrillas, who had betrayed them to the extent that he not only gave the army their location and their plans, but he was also literally in the passenger seat of a plane as it bombed them. Then later, the time that they caught him, he had returned with the intent to kill Fidel Castro in exchange for a bounty from the army. He admitted to this, he wasn't simply accused of it with no basis. And that's the only person that Che has ever been proven to have personally executed. The plural in that claim comes from nothing. After the communist takeover, he was put in charge of a revolutionary kangaroo court that swiftly ordered the executions of as many as several hundred alleged counter-revolutionaries. This is simply false. Che wasn't in charge of the courts of La Cabaña, which is what they're referring to here. Of course, they don't even mention it. He merely signed off on the sentences. He had no involvement in the actual court proceedings. And the people executed there were not simply counter-revolutionaries. Death sentences were only on the table for members of the police and the military who had committed horrible abuses, atrocities, and war crimes, as they, had been the armed enforcers of the fascist Batista regime. Not a single civilian was sentenced as such at La Cabaña. The next quote is simply fake. When even those in his inner circle began to beg clemency for the condemned, Che Guevara famously dismissed due process. To send men to the firing squad, judicial proof is unnecessary. These procedures are an archaic bourgeois detail. This is a revolution, and the revolutionary must become a cold killing machine motivated by pure hate. There's no existing primary source of Che Guevara ever saying anything like this. It first pops up in a 2005 book. There's like an entire industry of people just making shit up that Che Guevara supposedly said. These writers set out to write articles or books smearing him, but when they find that there's not actually any direct evidence of the things that they believe about him, they simply make some up. The original source of this one is Humberto Fontava, a Miami writer with no relevant expertise whatsoever, who makes a lot of bank off producing these incredibly lazy anti-Che / anti-Cuba books. And he unsurprisingly cites no primary source, so he pretty clearly made this up in the moment. That's obviously why no one else had cited it for the previous 40 years until he just suddenly wrote it. I really need to make a video on my main channel at some point about the importance of asking, what is the original source for this stuff? Not just about Che at all, but in general. Here's what he told the freaking United Nations in 1964. Yes, we have executed people. We are executing people and shall continue to execute people as long as it is necessary. Okay, and? The USA still executes people, and I'm 100% sure that the melting chud who wrote this agrees with that. This is a nothing statement with no commentary. What is the contention here exactly? Both Che Guevara and Fidel Castro thought homosexuality was counter-revolutionary and enthusiastically oversaw the roundup and imprisonment of gay men. Again, this was debunked in my video on Che's supposed homophobia and racism. Guevara never wrote anything on his thoughts on gay people, and he left Cuba and died years before the Cuban state started doing anything repressive to gay people. Remember the Cuban Missile Crisis when the world narrowly avoided nuclear war? That really bummed Che out. He wanted to at least level New York. We must walk the path of liberation even if it costs millions of atomic victims, he said. This is another fake quote, and it again originates from Fontava. Yep, that guy sure does a lot of inventing quotes, doesn't he? It's since been cited ad nauseum by idiot conservatives who have no idea how to do proper research or fact-checking. Let's take a look at Fontava's citation for this quote in the book that he wrote where it first appears, which came out in 2005. John Lee Anderson, a biographer of Guevara, reported that he told Sam Russell, an English correspondent for the socialist newspaper Daily Worker, that if the missiles had been under the control of Cuba, they would have been fired. So wait, what? That's not a citation of Che saying anything. That's Fontava simply making up a quote based on what one journalist said that Che had said to him. Just fictionalized. Pretty incredible. And just for good measure, no such quote is included in the biography that he cites here as his source either. Still a good enough source for the National Post though. The rest of the article is just endless conservative brainworms. You know, Che was just like Mao and Stalin. Also, it's not right that they can't wear Mussolini shirts, but Che is acceptable. Blah blah blah. They always just say the same stuff over and over, nothing new here. But anyway, that's another rehashed Che smear article dealt with. They're just gonna keep popping up forever it seems, regardless of how much the garbage that they spew is fact-checked. Empanada report out. Blah.